Hey YouTube, so what you're about to watch is a little experiment I'm trying. It's a public coaching session with a startup founder called Niko, whose startup's called Juttu. Juttu is a cancel flow optimization service. I often coach early stage product companies in how to take their product to market, how to get their early customers, how to achieve product market fit, and we thought it'd be interesting to record that type of content and put it out into the world for people who are trying the same at the moment. So if you like the content, comment down below, like, subscribe, all that stuff, and we really hope it's useful. Cheers. All right. Hi, Niko. Welcome to whatever this is.
Thanks for having me to whatever this is.
So for those of you listening or watching, Niko and I have been chatting for a while, going through sort of challenges of being a founder, building products, and we thought that this could be an interesting conversation just to start recording some of these, do a little bit of coaching in public. So for those who don't know me, my name's David. A product coach, fractional product leader, working with over 50 startups over the course of my career. Niko and I met each other maybe like 18 months ago online when he was on his first iteration of Juttu, since I think 1 or 2 pivots. And we were chatting, thought this could be an interesting experiment to see what it is. What we'll do is we'll just run through what his startup is, go through a little bit of coaching on some of these things, and see if it's interesting to anyone. So yeah, Niko, do you want to do a little intro of yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I've been basically bombarding David with questions and just getting a second opinion on anything from go-to-market to like economics of a product, as well as shaping the product. And so I've been getting a lot of value from our conversations, and since I'm attempting this startup in public, building this in public, it only makes sense to share that insight with everybody. So I think that's the benefit I've been getting, and hopefully some of you can get it through these conversations. I'm working on Juttu. It's currently it's a retention tool, SaaS. It's a cancel flow. It's what happens whenever you press cancel on a subscription, and this product has 2 functions. It's in order to find out why people leave your subscription product, and the other one is to retain as many of those people as possible. And so, yeah, the target group is other software companies, subscription providers, and we try to save revenue for them and find out why people leave. So that's what we do. And we're quite early stage, and so there's quite a lot of things still to be decided, and that's why the conversations with David have been pretty useful, and now we're doing them in public, so let's see how this goes.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, what we'll do today is we'll just run through like what is essentially what I do with founders when I start chatting with them for the first time. You could call this like a product strategy canvas or something like that, but it's just like a way for me to understand visualize what your business is, what it does, who it does it for, and how it does it. And then what we typically do is once we see like an area which is not super well defined, we'll circle back to that, dive into it a little bit more. And there's not really any wrong or right or wrong answers here. Building a startup is a ongoing experience as you are learning. It just takes time to like fill out this full sort of strategy, so that you can properly understand how you scale your company. The road to fit often is like filling in the gaps on these things. So if you're not really sure, or it feels like, oh, this is pretty loose, just let me know that. Right. So I'll start off by sharing this screen, Miro board. It's just a blank board for now, and then we'll do a few questions as we go. Let's see, maybe it's easier if I just type. No, all right. Cool. So start off by just telling me a little bit about the sort of vision for the business. Like, what is it that you're hoping? What are your goals? I don't think it needs to be so complicated at this stage. It's probably a little bit fluid, I would imagine. But yeah, just tell me a little bit about the vision for Juttu and what you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah. So the short of it is we came from a place where we wanted to give the teams that decide how to build product more information around what the users think about it, right? And then make more user-centric product decisions. We realized that the cancellation flow is a place where there's a lot of pain, both from the side of the company, obviously, because you're losing customers, and then on the customer side, because you're obviously saying no to a subscription product. So to keep it short, the goal is to help teams identify better why their customers are leaving. We believe that is like a super essential thing for teams to know in order to improve their product and to improve their offering. And the second thing is that we've seen that churn is really what kills subscription businesses, right? Retention is such an important thing, and obviously retention is a complex issue. How do you keep your customers around? But helping teams or businesses retain their customers is something that is a super big lever for their business. And if we can help their business be more successful, well, we hope that we can be successful too, right? So that's how we want to provide value, is help businesses, subscription businesses, retain customers and retain MRR and understand why customers are leaving, so they can improve the product long term.
Okay, cool. So that's the sort of product vision, and where do you hope to take this? Take Juttu, is your plan to sort of scale this into a much larger, much larger business? Is it Are you planning to bring in investment? Are you planning to, like, what type of business are you trying to build? Is it a performance business? Is it sort of a bootstrapped product? It's going to be part of a larger portfolio. Like, what's the vision there?
That's a good question. So we are currently self-funded. We're two founders that have coaching businesses that have been funding basically the agency arm has been funding the product arm so far. And we believe strongly in like the self-funded bootstrapping mindset in order to validate a problem, a solution, and then that kind of fit. And we're in that stage where we have first customers. We don't have we'll figure out what we don't have figured out yet, right? Probably a lot. The vision is definitely to be a sustainable, bigger business, meaning that we don't believe that every business of the future will be a one-man show. Hiring talented people that know stuff better than me is something that I'd love to do. And obviously that also builds the trust with the customers that we will be around and that we'll be solving more and more of their problems, right? I think a lot of solo businesses have that issue. So is the vision super clear whether or not we need funding for that, yes or no? There is some players in the space that have been bootstrapping for quite a while and have been profitably growing. But if funding is the way to get to a bigger market size or really get those critical people in, I could see that as well. But I think proving that this is a profitable, growing business that is a solution to a real problem, that would be something that I would love to do with 100% equity in our hands.
Of course.
Yeah.
And in terms of like headcount, have you got any ambitions there? Are you looking to scale this to be a larger company, or are you hoping to be more lean, sort of something that you can take long term?
So I think one of the talking to a lot of my friends and fellow founders that have raised, like, they need to be extremely clear on this. Obviously, I would say I'm taking some liberties here by saying, like, we will figure this out how it feels right. What we know is we don't want to be like super small and like this being a lifestyle business. In B2B, I think if you want to be serious, you need to be taking this seriously. And so I think like a headcount, if aiming for a headcount of 20 people is like in tech these days, like I think you can build like a really trustworthy, sustainable business there. So like I'm not looking like, if the opportunities arise to grow much larger and so on, then of course we'll take it. But I think right now you can do so much with like a small team, and I think a small team starts at 8 people, right, or something like that. Or so I think in that range, I think you can provide a lot of economic value, build great tech. And I think that might be like 20 people might be like a sweet spot actually for a lot of businesses. So I think maybe that's for now the kind of idea.
Okay, makes total sense. I think it's really important to have like an idea of the potential like headcount that you're looking for, or the size of the business you're trying to grow. And like often when I'm talking to early stage, I think of the story that Wesbush, PLG, Founder-Led Growth, talks about often from user flow. User flow was 3 people and they scaled to like $4.6 million in annual recurring revenue with 3 employees. It's insane. It was like one guy who was like their head of product and CEO, then one guy who was I I think he did like customer support, sales, and marketing. And then they were like, oh, but we also need a designer. So they hired a designer, and that managed to scale them. They exited a little while ago. Yeah, but a pretty impressive story, that. And I think increasingly we're seeing these sort of, I guess, like SaaS-based experiences where people who are just like hyper obsessing on. The reason it comes to mind for Juttu in particular is because it's very similar in like, it's like, oh, they were focusing on like the user onboarding, and I think that it's a reminder that you don't need to go massive if you are smart. Like, they automated quite a lot of things. I was listening to an interview with one of the founders recently, and they were like, you know, even simple things like you couldn't book a call with us unless you really went through and like watched a video and everything like that. And it just being mindful of like how much you want to scale your team and your headcount can really make a huge difference to the type of business you end up building.
And maybe I don't know if we've talked about this, but maybe just to share that some of this is deliberate. So a lot of the stuff we do is pure chaos, right? It's pure figuring out, shooting the shit, throwing spaghetti, all the things. This one thing is quite deliberate. So we were looking at business models that are small in scope, that are close to the money, meaning that they're close to the actual value chain. We can talk about the mistakes we've done in the past that didn't include those factors. And we went for specifically small in scope where there's no platform play needed, meaning that it is not a business that lends itself to the typical VC route where you go extremely broad and you have to find massive TAM. But rather where the value that you can provide is quite focused, but so close to the money that you're like, you can charge for it, and you can charge well for it. And so that's kind of, we will figure out if this is going to work out, but that is an intentional choice to match the business model to our ambitions and way we want to run a business, which is something I definitely didn't think about like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, right-sizing the opportunity is super important. I think it's more so today than it has been ever, I think, because you have options now in terms of like how you scale your company. Used to be that those options weren't really there. You know, if go to market, like taking a product to market was going to take 12 to 18 months. Most people didn't have the runway to fund a team for 12 to 18 months. Even just a team of 3 or 4 people was pretty difficult, unless you were talking about people with successful exits or, you know, previously successful careers. It was pretty challenging to bootstrap a company. Simply because the economics didn't work. I think now it's getting easier and easier because you can size the opportunity. You know, like I've worked with so many founders who had like a really solid 6-figure business, but they needed a 7-figure team to run it. You know, so they needed a team that was going to cost them 7 figures a year so that they could make 6 figures a year. As a result, they end up having to stretch themselves. They have to set really, really aggressive goals for future monetization. They have to go after larger and larger TAMs, total addressable markets, and it just ends up creating like a lot of like mismatch of opportunity to the size of the opportunity that's at hand. They're pursuing things that like makes it very difficult for them to actually be successful because the things that they're saying they can do are not achievable. Are very hard to achieve. You know, it's this sort of curve, I think, is what you see often is that they're pitching this hockey stick.
Right.
And I think that this is not really realistic for like the majority of businesses. It's much better to sort of build something that just sort of goes up like to the side. Though most of the time it's more like this, you know.
Yeah.
Or much more wild swings. But just being patient and sort of like stepping up bit by bit over time, I think makes a huge, being willing to sort of plateau for a while before you have a big step up, and then being aware of like what size of opportunity you're addressing. Because ironically, like if you get the size of your opportunity right, and you have the business set up properly, the way that you can scale that actually ends up becoming much more scalable, because almost always we drastically underestimate the size of the market that we could address.
Right.
Like if you think about like things like Okta and stuff like that, like security plays and stuff, I'm sure they had never would have in a million years thought that they could be, you know, billion-dollar valuation companies,
Right.
just doing like authentication. But you tend to sort of realize like, oh, we've actually just solved a really valuable piece of the value chain, and it ends up being that focus ends up leading to like a much bigger opportunity just because you focused on the small opportunity to begin with.
Right.
But cool. Let me just clear this. So the next thing I want to talk to you, we've got a little bit of an idea of like the vision of what you want to do with Juttu. We'll talk about value proposition just so people know what we're talking about a little bit. We've already talked a little bit. We'll probably move some of these over. Here. Let's do like this. I think that this is like a good understanding of like what the ideal is. But what would you say are like the major like pain relievers, the things that are helping, or the major like things that are helping your target audience address needs or desires? What would you say are like the sort of key things that you should be aware of?
Yeah. So this is dependent on who we're talking to. So I'm going to summarize and put them into one bucket and not like have this like as segments of our customer base now, because I think it's a bit early for that. But meaning that not all people have all of these. We see that with our first customers, there's definitely just the pain of churn. There's the pain of just the pure sheer amount of customers leaving the door every month. There, if you think about, there is existing products that have been around for a while that have a certain level of success, and they just realize, hey, we're losing 50K of revenue a month, and that is just something that if growth becomes or profitability becomes something that you look at, you're realizing like, okay, there's just this leak here. Okay, so every subscription business has that, and some feel that pain more than others. Companies that feel that pain more are our ICP. Now the question is like, what does that mean in detail? I would say there is like the smaller, business that has been profitable for a long time, kind of maybe the step growth thing, where growth is slowing down or growth is like a real manual effort, right? And then the churn feels a lot more painful because you have to really work for the growth. So that is the case. And then you have probably like the AI products that are attention based. So there's a lot of excitement around using these products. There's a lot of low friction to get going with these products. But the issue is also that it is like you change it like you change your shirt, right? So you have massive growth potential, and you have massive TAM, and you might even have massive funding. But the issue is that people leave as well. So that's just like the churn landscape, I would say. There's like for us, there's like the smaller profitable business that has been around, and then there's the fast growing but high turnover business. Those are the two businesses that are really interesting for us, and the pains that they have that we try to help them solve. Then there's obviously like the larger, like Adobe's of the world, the LinkedIn sales navigators. We will never build their cancel flow. We will never build their retention tooling. And that's fine. So what I'm saying is there's other parts of the market that experience churn, but those are the pains that are interesting for us. That is the economic side, and then the other side is the finding out why people leave sites. So there's especially founder-led businesses or businesses with a strong product team that really care about knowing more why people leave. Now, some companies might do exit interviews. Some people might do an exit survey that doesn't get any responses, right? And what we can do is we can plug into that flow and actually force the customer to at least give some information about why they're leaving, and then analyzing that feedback, clustering it, etc., to make sense of it. And there the real pain is like, I'm busy, I do stuff, I know customers are leaving, but that's like a blind spot for me. And so if you think about it, the simplest way for us to fix this is like, what we do is like a weekly Slack notification with like the main reasons why people left this week, what are the numbers, and then if there's any trend changes in that. So for example, you adjusted your pricing and all of a sudden there's an uptick in people leaving due to pricing concerns, or you changed the plan structure or you changed a certain feature. So basically it's a blind spot for people, and that is a pain point as well, right? Like, I don't know, it feels bad I don't know why it's happening, and I don't have any time to think about it in detail. And so it feels like I'm flying blind there. And so that is the other pain that we see.
Okay. So optimizing cancellation flow, cancel flows. Go. And then I'll just start on the customer profile a little bit here. This is pretty high level at the minute. But what I caught is take that away here. In terms of the sort of core pains that you've identified so far, you've got like churn / the sort of feeling of your growth being a leaky bucket. Growth is slowing or stagnating, and then like high growth businesses having high turnover. So the problem gets bigger over time. In terms of needs or desires, we've got more of the knowing why people are leaving, so actual building of understanding, and optimizing the cancel flow. So actually like having more control over that rather than like what I would say is this is like a build versus DIY, or DIY versus buy solution, right? So when you get into thinking about the value proposition, typically I would steer people towards that sort of conversation with the value proposition. So making sure it's like, don't waste time DIYing this flow, because when we get into like customer profiles, particularly if you're building a product, one of the things that you didn't really address here is time. So everyone's always time poor. And one of the sort of fundamental areas that sounds like you're addressing is the time poor people can just sort of like plug this in and have a optimized time flow. So let's put in something about like time.
Right. The two time things that we realize is the one is you don't have time to analyze potential data that you have around it, or like to dig somewhere, and then the other one is you don't have time to build a nice optimized cancel flow yourself. It's a good point.
You talk about having no time to like optimize or investigate. What is the sort of what's the main reason you find that the people don't have that time? Like, where is the attention going instead?
So there is there's always like the arguments that we've heard so far, because I've been asking this in prospecting and discovery calls, is we are focused on onboarding. We're focused on basically activation over retention, or we're seeing really like people, so basically other parts of the user journey. So it's just other things scream louder. And I would say the other one is that getting value from the data that you do have is not as easy. So what I've seen is all we have is a single choice question. Like either we don't have any data around cancellations, like we don't know why people leave, we don't know how many, we don't know, okay. Then the next step is you have some data, like in Stripe, you see how many people left, how much MRR you lost, okay. Then the next one is, that's basically maturity of knowledge around cancellation. And then the next step would be you have a single choice question that says like too expensive or something. And so then all you have is a pie chart, right? You have a pie chart of like too expensive versus like not enough features. Okay, great. And then what the time lack is not like I don't have time to look at that pie chart. I don't have time to improve our knowledge around this. So it's actually valuable, because that pie chart obviously doesn't tell you jack, right? Like it's too expensive. Great. Okay. We should lower prices. Like that's the outcome. Like that's probably not what's going to happen. So I would say that is mostly like where it's at. It's like, it's a problem. Like we should be smarter here. We are not. And I don't have time to improve the situation. So it's rather that than I don't have time to look at an actual data sheet. It's you don't have the data in the way that it's useful to you, and you don't have time to improve it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very common problem that you run into with startups or early stage products. They're more concerned with filling the bucket than patching the holes, and in some way it does make sense, right?
It makes sense
because if they have only 30 days of like 30-day retention is terrible. Filling that bucket seems like it's a priority, because the bucket is emptying at such a dramatic rate that they just want to fill it. Like they feel like they need to fill it at such an explosive rate in order to offset that the people coming out the bottom. Often I think it is a lack of attention, or it's a lack of understanding and maturity around sort of your typical AAR funnel. I think we get really caught up in acquisition and activation, and often kind of forget about keeping people engaged, which is a pretty common issue I've run into over the course of my career. It's not usually until you have like solved until you start having questions about like how do we increase lifetime value, how do we reduce the customer acquisition cost, those questions like retention doesn't become front of mind, because everyone just assumes that if they get the right customers and they figure out acquisition, that retention won't be an issue, but it almost always is.
We get a lot of that in prospecting discovery calls. It's the assumption that the churn that you have is unpreventable churn. So meaning that, you know, there's always like there's like the argument is like there's always some set of customers who just naturally want to leave, and you know, so that's kind of the mental state of mind you're in when you are when you're basically saying, there's nothing really we can do, right? And so that is a good like proxy to realize like there is the problem awareness might be there, but the solution awareness isn't, or something where you're saying, it's a pain. Obviously, you realize it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be talking, right? You wouldn't be talking about churn. But then the area of the line of defense is basically to say, the kind of churn we have, our product has, is unique and unpreventable. That is something we hear quite a lot.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. And then who is the target profile for this? Like, is it founders? Is it product managers? Is it marketing managers? Like who's sort of like, what's the right profile? Like, what's the sort of segment that you are finding the most interest from at the moment?
Yeah. So we did this by trying a lot and then figuring out who's maybe not the right person, but we can talk about that. But right now what we're seeing is that the profile is small company that has a founder who cares about this stuff, meaning they have the actual intention to optimize lifetime value and feel the pain really like viscerally if people leave. That is if it's a smaller company. If it is a little bit more of a scaled company, meaning we're talking more than 20, 30, 40 people, then we're seeing the product managers being curious, or sometimes UX, say product teams, right? But the product managers as a proxy to be curious about the reason why people leave. There are still very rarely product managers that actually own retention. We've met some of them. Then they're obviously also interested in the economics, but otherwise product teams tend to be more curious about the actual feedback than the actual net revenue retention. And then on the net revenue retention side, the question is who owns that if it's not the CEO, founder type. So in larger organizations, if we can find the CRO, the Chief Revenue Officer, that person understands this immediately and sees the value immediately. It's just that the Chief Revenue Officer role is actually still quite rare, at least in the European market, for example. But I think globally, it's still kind of niche. So what we've seen is that people who own growth are then the next person that we can go to. And this can be a full life cycle growth manager, so in case there is one, or it can be, I know, to be honest, role definitions here is a bit tough because this is called differently in many organizations. But if I had to boil it down, it's like if there's a smaller company, the CEO cares about this whole thing, both finding out why people leave as well as net revenue retention. In bigger companies, this splits into two. The person who cares about finding out why people leave, that is UX, product, etc. And then the people who care about the revenue retention. And that revenue retention person can be called a growth manager, can be called a chief revenue officer. These are the kind of people. Sometimes it's the head of customer success and support, right? So that's a struggle that we've seen in larger organizations to find the role, the role name. What we know is what they need to care about. Right, so that's the current status. This is a pretty
irregular occurrence. If I was to guess, I would say that you're having more success here with the small founders, and I think I can explain why. It's all to do with your buyer chain. So you have your users then you have your influencer, and then sometimes you have like a saboteur, but let's just say buyer for the sake of this conversation. When you get into larger organizations, like you start to have this like, okay, this is the buyer, this would be the user, and there might be like someone here in the middle who's like influencing or sabotaging the discussion. Maybe a designer, maybe a head of product, those sorts of people. Understanding those and speaking like this person can be very important as well, because it allows you to start understanding like who you're communicating and who you need to make understand, like who you actually reach. Like if you're like speaking to founders, the chances are that you're going to end up speaking to let's say a CEO, CRO, CFO maybe, a stretch. But if that's the sort of networks that you're in, but if you're doing sort of more like targeted outreach for your you're probably more likely to get into a situation where you're speaking to like head of product, CPO, CS, like head of CS, and here you're probably just getting into PMs, CX designers, people who are like frontline. So like it's I would guess like for like larger companies like probably an activity to work through, maybe in this session, maybe in another one, would just be like to like build up that chain of to figure out like who we're speaking to and when and why are we speaking to them, because the difference is that at the top here in the small company is that's one person or it's two people. So you get speaking to a founder and they're like, I care about this. I am the user, the influencer, and the decision, the buyer all in one. So I think like it's good to truncate to untruncate this, to pull it apart a little bit and actually like explain so that you when you get into these conversations with you understand who you're speaking to, because like on this buyer side here, what they care about is very different to what the user cares about. As you're saying here, like up at this level on the buyer side, it's mostly revenue. And whereas here, it mostly gets to be like feedback and data.
Yeah, or even like looking good in front of colleagues, right? We've been realizing that in the larger conversation, larger companies, there's a lot of secondary motivations of like, I want to be a growth person that doesn't just focuses on quality of revenue as well, or I want to be a product manager that is known to also, show tangible results, like a reduction in churn rate. And so that is also like an individual motivation that we've been seeing, and that's a more complicated web to go through. So where we are right now is we have like. I would say they're design partners, not all of them call themselves that, but we have like 10 customers, of which like the most of them are in the first bucket up there. And those are the ones that actually activated a lot faster and are less of a longer term, like let's get you onboarded kind of situation. We have quite a lot of the latter, like the bigger companies in the pipeline, and we're talking to them actively, but the conversations are more complex. The business model, et cetera, is set up so we can work with both. We want to work with both. We explicitly try to get smaller companies in the door faster so we can get data and feedback on how the product works for them. And we want to make a product that works up to a certain size of company, right? We don't want to make a product that doesn't help the individual founder or that doesn't help the small team of 4. We don't want to build a product that helps, that needs to be optimized for the corporate, but there's like an SMB kind of play. So far deliberate, but I would say that the clarity we have around the larger companies and the profiles for buyer, decision maker, influencer, etc., like that picture is loosey-goosey at best.
Yeah, it's pretty common, and it actually brings us on to like the next section of this sort of thing pretty cleanly. Which is user experience, because what you can do when you get into user experience at a high level, user experience is how does someone discover, learn, buy, use, and get support. High level customer journey map. I don't think we'll go into this today, but getting an understanding of like the different actors in this stage. So if we just move this out of the way underneath here for a second, what we often see with, like you said, the simple founder, it's just one actor. So they just have like one thing in each, or a couple of things in each, right? And it's a pretty simple, straightforward thing. But if you switch over to a larger company, you start having like more like people in the loop. So it ends up being like, okay, this person has to be involved here and here, this person here and here, here and here and here and here. So you need to start having like a different channels basically for like where they get involved and how they can learn about you, how they can find out about you. Just like a small amount to learn in here. So I think like getting, and like this stuff it's like the stuff we often take for granted. It's really easy as product builders to just sort of like go, oh, we're speaking to like a larger company and not making a huge amount of progress simply because the person that you don't have like a solid understanding of like, oh, well, actually now it's time for us to engage the buyer. Like we need to have that discussion now with like who is going to actually implement this thing. And I've experienced this a lot where it really this influencer ends up becoming very important in that situation, because those are the people who typically become like the sponsor for the product, if you want to call it that. Yeah. So I'd say getting an idea of like who the influencer is in your chain, and then building out this customer experience map is like two really important steps to like properly mapping out like the customer experience of or the early customer experience of Juttu. And then you can start actually nailing down where the friction points are, and what's causing the sort of like potentially, as you described it, somewhat slow uptake from larger organizations. Yeah. Which could just be speaking to the wrong person, or
right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so funny because I think this is valuable to everybody, but like for me in particular, this is super interesting to think about, because obviously we made the shortcut to be like, these don't need to be our first customers, right? Because we expect it to be more complex and slower, and we want to really just make sure that we have good case studies basically from first customers to dovetail that into larger companies, and have the proof and the conversation based on actual data that we have, success we've shown with smaller companies, so we can put that into conversations with bigger ones. But it is maybe concerning deliberateness, what I've realized as well. This is a very deliberate process, and is one that takes work and time and thought process. And looking at especially self-funded bootstrapped products, what I see a lot is basically they don't do any of this, right? They say we're small, we're self-service, we are indie hackers, we don't want to work with large B2B, etc., etc. And because you asked about the ambition before, I think that's like a really helpful connection for me right now, that we're both committed to scaling this to a certain degree, and then also committed to actually working through this more complex map of buying process and using process and retention activation processes. So that probably already differentiates the way we handle the business and everything from a lot of stuff you read out there, right? And so I need to, as a founder, like focus that this is not the reference point. The reference point is not the indie hacker who writes on X every now and then about what they built and hopes that people buy it for $4.99, right? And so I just need to keep remembering that this is more the activities that I'm going to be doing, that we're going to be doing, versus the other one, which probably is like obvious, but for me it's good to remember now that we go through it.
I mean, yeah, I think the thing is that your background is in product, so like you're going to play to your strengths in product. Yeah. And often it's easy to get sort of sidetracked and try and play to other people's strengths, like what you're seeing working elsewhere. I think it's important to like get back to the things that, like, what would you tell your client to do if you were coaching them in this situation, and think about those things, because like, yeah, sometimes it might feel like you're emulating like other indie hackers or other solo like bootstrap founders, but actually like you don't need to follow their playbook you have your own, you do know how to do these things. It's just easy to like sort of lose yourself because you know there's 100 things you could focus on. It's easy to get just to sort of like be pulled into like, well, I'll just build more features or I'll just implement more things. And I think auditing like what you're doing often is like a really important step to avoid doing that, to avoid getting into that like, I know I'm doing all the wrong things, or all the things that I shouldn't be doing. I know that, but I don't have time to do the things that I should be doing. And I think if you like pull this a little bit further out, like zoom out a little bit from here, what it sounds like to me is that it's probably a conversation volume thing a little bit at the moment. That you know, if you of what we've identified, we have back in down here. We've talked about PMs, CX designers, product designers, or service designers perhaps might be another one. Heads of product, CPOs, heads of customer experience or customer success, and people in charge of growth. And then we've got like CEOs, CFOs, CROs on the sort of buyer side for larger companies. Like, I think that the challenge becomes with like targeting larger companies is like, how do you get volume of conversations in with those people? What I would say is probably the most effective thing to do is think very hard about the sort of intersection between you've got like founders here and then like your product leaders here. So like how can you sort of get hold of people, figure out the intersection, and probably is much bigger intersection than this, and have conversations that sort of cover both bases, so that when you start to do like outreach and marketing or positioning like to the company, you're talking really to people who are influencing decision making process, so understanding the pains, needs and desires they have, the jobs that they need to be to do. And probably just having like a high volume of conversations with people in that category, so that you can nail down the jobs really that they're trying to do. Because I think like what we have up here is like a really solid like initial hypothesis of what like of capabilities, but I think what we could do together over coming sessions perhaps is like break down the actual value proposition, like the customer profile, into like clear chunks of like, you know, we know what this looks like, but jobs, pains, needs, desires, and try and find like a sort of common single profile that you can target. Like, so you have like one avatar basically, because I think one of the things that you're going to struggle with as a bootstrapped founder is targeting. If you start having like conversations, trying to have conversations with, you know, dozens of people, you just get spread very thin and your focus will become pretty slim. You probably need to do a volume of those to begin with, like a few, like maybe like 5 here, 5 here, 5 here, 5 here, 5 here. But what I would usually recommend someone doing at your stage is being like pretty ruthless about like, if this is your CX designer, this is your head of product, this is your CEO, this is CROs, and what else do we say? Let's say PMs. What you're probably going to find is that okay, there's a number of reasons you might not be able to get hold of these people, but you could say like, okay, CROs are really hard to get hold of, as you mentioned, so we're just going to like take them, we're going to speak to 5 of them, we're going to understand their needs, and we're just not going to target them anymore because it's hard to get hold of them, it's hard to understand them, it's hard to get them on the call. We're too early stage to do that, we're going to mature later. We might then say CX designers are too far away from influencing the decision-making process. These are assumptions, like these are, but just as to explain how this sort of process might go. But you should still speak to them to understand where they're at with this stuff. So maybe we'll switch to my eraser. So yeah, maybe we'd cross them out, and then over time you can start to circle in on like, oh, actually we see that like maybe these are the 2 we need to speak to the most. PMs are interesting, but again, like they're too busy with this, right? And this is just picking up, like inferring from your conversations.
Yeah, you infer pretty well. I would say.
Like
that's probably what we've done roughly. Like I think we've talked to like 5 CROs, we've talked to like 10 PMs, we talked to a bunch of CX people and a lot of customer success leads. But they often earn they feel churn, they have goals around it, but obviously we're talking about self-service cancellation, so the overlap is often quite low with what we do. And so what you circled is basically roughly what we're seeing is like CROs are a great fit if they exist. They're usually at large organizations, which we have a hard time getting into right now. Yep. CEOs and head of product are far enough from the implementation that they understand the need to buy versus build, while the PM oftentimes is like, yeah, we can do something like this in-house. And then I try to explain to them why that might be a waste, like that might not be the best investment of their time. And that conversation is a long one for it in the end being like oftentimes not a conversion. So I think you inferred pretty well here.
Yeah, I think it's good to just, because then if you're having those conversations, like it sounds to me like when we started this, you were like, oh, we have different people we can speak to and we're exploring with. But it sounds to me that you're at a place where you, at the very least, have a hypothesis for fit here with these people. It's still maybe a little bit patchy, but with these two people, like senior head of products, so maybe like getting back to an activity to do between this and between sessions is to reflect on like how do we really nail down the value proposition or the customer profile and value proposition for the CEOs and head of products so that we can speak directly to them, and how do we then tune it so that we can if we connect to a PM, we don't say, hey, we'd like to chat to you about implementing this thing. It's like, who's your head of product? Is the conversation that you have. Like, tell me about, like, and it's like, would you be willing to introduce us to, put us in touch with your head of product? We'd really appreciate it. We'll tell them that you reach out. Now, you might have to, in an early stage, go through an escalation process where you're explaining Juttu to them, but it says, like, where you're explaining to a PM and then getting them to refer you in. But ideally, you want to get, like, if you can nail down a stronger value proposition and customer profile for these two people, you'll probably experience it I would imagine it'll get a little bit more straightforward, rather than it sort of being this sort of spread of people that you have today that you're trying to attract in the chain. Doesn't mean you have to not have those conversations. It just means that in terms of like, you can still speak to PMs, you can still speak to CROs. It's just, where does the focus area go? Like, where are you shining the light? Like, if you think of a stage, where is the spotlight gonna be shining? That's a great illustration. Like, I think figuring out how to narrow that spotlight is going to be like a really effective use of your limited resources
that's the moment. The main thing. Yeah, absolutely. I see the opportunity obviously in wide, but the exercise is mostly in actually focusing, not because there is an opportunity left or right, just because you can't serve all of those different people.
Exactly. Like, I mean, it's not that you, like, again, it's not that you can't serve them all. It's a scope issue, right? Like, when we get back to the idea of right sizing opportunity, we start to pick up we start to understand that, like, we need to actually, like, really focus here. So, you're talking early stage CEOs, seed stage, maybe even pre-seed, all the way up to like Series A, have some customers, or heads of products with maybe one or two PMs reporting into them, nothing much bigger than that. And then it becomes a question of, like, how do we speak to as many of those people as possible to make them understand what Juttu is? How do we reach out to them so that they can get there, so that we can really start to, like, nail down, the customer experience? And the customer experience or the user experience might be where these people start, that some of these other people that you sort of like crossed out end up re-entering that sphere, where you have to then understand them as a user or understand them as an influencer, or still support them in some way, just not in a way that is going to, because we're talking about, like, building a successful product. We're not, like, today, if we're talking product design, it's a little bit, it becomes a bit of a different task, right? Then you still need to speak to the CX people, you still need to speak to the PMs, because they're going to be the ones responsible for, like, running this thing day to day. But if, like, the main job of the head of product is to understand, like, where revenue growth is going to be and how to move it, that's one of the main things that they're sort of, or the CEO is going to be concerned with. The core value proposition could simply be that, like, it's clarity for clarity of churn and retention. Like, rather than like talking about the cancel flow, like that might not be where their concern is. It could just be that like it's a hop, skip, and a jump away from like what the this is where it gets tricky with building products, right? Is that sometimes the product itself isn't the thing that actually attracts people; it's the outcome that they're achieving. You know, like maybe it's time to take 5 minutes.
Doc has entered the chat. Yes.
Is that my earphones as well?
Nice.
Should we take a quick water break?
Yeah, sounds
Right,
good.
cool.
I'm gonna get new water.
You're back.
Yeah.
I think for now, what I want to focus on with you, we've got maybe like 20 minutes left in this episode, is your go-to-market, how you're currently attracting customers. I think, and we'll maybe spend like 10 minutes on that, and then just talk about a few actions that we could see. So yeah, let's talk about go-to-market today, and we can revisit this in a new session in the future if we feel it's valuable. So yeah, how are you currently sort of like what channels are you across? How are you currently finding customers? Like how is your approach to telling the world about Juttu working today?
Yeah. So the short of it is we're doing LinkedIn cold outreach as well as just content, and then kind of tailing that into conversations. People that engage with our content, asking them for introductions. So basically there's two primary ways we're getting in front of customers right now. The one is you have gotten a pretty targeted, pretty direct cold DM from us on LinkedIn, explaining the outcome we're trying to get at and asking for casual conversation. Or the other one is you have engaged somehow with ours or other people's content around the topic of retention and self-service subscription, and we get into a conversation that way. Those are the two only channels, right? Like that includes network, obviously. So yep. People are recommending us, giving introductions, but yeah. Okay.
And how is it going? How you feeling the balance between like going to market or bringing the product to market versus like building it? How is that going?
I mean, the obvious, the honest answer is it's always a struggle, but I think we found a decent way to kind of wave it back and forth. So meaning that we did a big push on getting more people in the door, more people in conversations, like 6 weeks ago, and we've got to the point where we have like some set of pipelines, some people committed and some people integrated, right? And that's the first time that we feel like, oh wow, okay, so at least there's this. Now obviously we need to like iterate and build the stuff in the product and solidify the stuff that we sold to those people, right? So now all of a sudden, just making the product more usable, we've got the first feedback of like, I don't know how to do this in the product, right? So all of a sudden this becomes the priority, which we tried really hard to deprioritize because our home is product. So all we want to do is product. So we went pretty hard on go-to-market for our kind of level. And now feel like, hey, we can shift back to building product for 2 weeks, making it more solid, not per se adding new features, but just making it usable, making it like removing a lot of stuff that is basically confusing, make the experience more smooth, get them onboarded, and then use that iteration in order to push go-to-market faster. So it's not by any means like automated and just kind of works. We have a bunch of ongoing conversations, which we have like in a Kanban board. We have some people that have seen the demo but are not yet committed. We have some that are committed, and we have some that are implemented. So in short, right now, I feel fine. The scalability of this approach is there, but is questionable. Like I think this will become a big problem once we have our current pipeline onboarded and worked through. But right now, I'm actually fine with this because we would like to make these first customers really happy. And that is the primary goal. And to be honest, if we don't onboard like 5 new customers a week starting now, but can onboard those first 15 correctly and they're happy with it, then that would be a massive win for us in the next weeks.
What's your timeline then on it? Because if you say that like it's you're happy with this approach today, like when would this, like, so you onboard these 15 customers, like what's the sort of timeline for you to sort of start scaling this?
Yeah. So if we can get 15 customers of different sizes, nothing is, like with the majority being let's say businesses under the like 20K MRR scale, like the smaller team founders, and then some bigger ones. If we can get them onboarded within the next 2 to 3 weeks, then I can see like December being a time where growth and go-to-market becomes the basically sole focus. What we have right now is we have the first customers with different payment providers with different configurations actually bumping against all the issues that we have in the product, meaning lack of clarity, meaning lack of features, meaning lack of just guidance, for example. And so we're basically fixing up all these things from all this valuable feedback that we're getting now. So this is basically the first time we have, like we launched pretty recently, right? So this is the first time we have actual customers in the product every day, and they're like, okay, but how does this work? And so if we can iterate in November to onboard them and to make it actually useful for them, so that we don't send the next people into the same issues, then that would be a win.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I think it's good to have it's pretty cliche advice at this point, but doing unscalable things is important because it brings you closer to your customer.
I mean, I can quickly say how we're doing it right now. Maybe like this is the outreach, right? And then what we do is we do very manual conversations with everybody. We are happy to jump on a call with no matter if you're the buyer, the influencer, or whatever. We try to give as much value as possible. We prepare some ways they could increase their retention, no matter if they want to use our product or not. Mm-hmm. We once they say, hey, this would be a good idea, we basically manually create a great cancel flow for them, so they don't have to self-start or cold start in the product. We create the organizations, invite them to their organization. We send them like a screen recording or whatever of walking them through what we set up for them. Like it's all one-on-one, right? It's all concierge. And then we're really like there for them to jump on a call every time, or we remind them with emails about like how we write a custom guide for how to integrate Paddle as a payment provider, because we now have that integration live. So it's really a lot of hand-holding and just being there for those customers, and that doesn't scale at all, right? And so in that sense, I'm kind of happy with the pipeline right now, because we couldn't do this for 50 customers in parallel. And so we're doing it for 10 to 15, and since we are like a real B2B business, we don't need thousands of customers at this point. That's kind of how it looks like right now. Very unscalable.
Yeah, I mean, it's not inherently an issue. Like, I think unscalable things work well. Are you documenting the process? Like, you capture like, because what you need to do, like the next step of your product will be, if you have to do this today, like particularly this part, like onboard them manually, basically. The next part of your roadmap probably has to be onboarding, right?
Right.
So like you're moving into, if we're talking about retention for your customers, you're in the acquisition and activation phase, right, of the funnel. So you have a small acquisition funnel at the moment, but it's useful and working for you. And what you need to get into is the activation area. That sounds like that's the choke point now.
Right. It's an integration, and so what we have is we try to, because you mentioned like, are we documenting this? We're trying to document everything in the product. We're trying to build, like if we need to send an email to explain to them how the integration in the SDK works, what we try to do is we send that email manually, and then I also build a system email that now for every customer starting from that point, they will get that email automatically. So we're trying to be as clever as possible with this, where we do the unscalable thing, and then we say, okay, let's just also add the scalable thing to the product right now, so we don't have to do this every time.
Yeah.
Not perfect at it, but that's what we're kind of trying to do, like either document the process or actually already automate it. So basically, they're currently getting a custom teller recording, and then we're also doing the generic one, which we add as a link to the mail, so they can watch the recording, and that's not personalized then for all coming customers. So that's kind of the idea.
Right. This is interesting because it actually kind of goes back to the previous step we were on, like with the user experience and building out that,
Right.
If you think today that you're focused like very much on, if we talk, let's actually just annotate this, like how they're discovering you today is a DM.
Yep.
And then they're learning about you through a call, then they have to be like, you are then an actor in this, where you are then having to like manually onboard them.
Yeah.
And then, so I think like starting to capture the process in this way as well, so you can understand like how the experience is evolving over time.
Yeah.
It's a good way to just sort of to build out your customer experience map as it is today, so that you understand like where you're changing it. It's quite a useful method of like understanding like, okay, here is like a pain, or here could be a pain.
Absolutely. Yeah. Makes sense.
Probably also here, to be honest. When you start getting past those sort of first 10 or 15 customers and you're starting to get testimonials, that's definitely going to cause some pain.
Yeah.
1 second.
Of course. The dog is barking. I can, in the meantime, just for myself and others, reflect here. So this was also obviously deliberate choices, but something that we need to work on. We are quite focused on showing a value of a better cancellation flow pretty quickly. So you feel self-service, like onboarded, excited for this. And David, I'm just riffing on what you just said, just so I have it in my mind as well. So what I'm saying is we focus pretty hard on like getting the self-service person to like check out the product, understand what we do differently than what they have currently, and then feeling that excitement of like, this would be a better solution. And that, from what we've seen, like works pretty well. It's pretty fast time to aha, but the value actually appears when you have this integrated in your product. And so there is quite a big gap there, and it's like 11 lines of JavaScript, as well as an OAuth connection with your payment provider, which doesn't sound like much, but still is, especially with testing, is quite a big ask. Obviously in larger organizations, this is even bigger than in smaller ones. So that is currently the bottleneck that we have, is obviously getting more people into the pipeline, like just overall go-to-market, but then inside this map, it's the getting them over the hurdle to actually implement this. And so that will remain probably the main challenge, and is obviously a valuable problem to solve for us, because we, A, otherwise don't have customers, and B, we expect our customers to be pretty sticky. They even say so themselves. Like, I'm not going to remove this very quickly, right? And so that's probably going to be a major focus for us going forward.
Yeah, I guess as well, figuring out how others in the space have dealt with that challenge is pretty important, because sorry, the dog was chewing on something. Yeah, how others in this space have dealt with this challenge is pretty important to understand. I know that a lot of people end up going down like the developer community route, because it's just the easiest way in, but that's usually for more technical products, I guess, given that this is not really like a hugely technical product. Like, it sounds more like it's not aimed at technical people. It is a challenge if they have to rely on their tech people to implement it. Have you looked at if there's any other alternative like ways in which you could get people going?
Yeah, I mean, the short version is, if we don't want to significantly change the value proposition, the answer is no. We are basically an add-on to your payment provider. We need to be able to influence subscriptions for you. And there is no real other way. Paddle, for example, has API keys versus an OAuth connection, so we can do it, you can set this up even if you don't have the rights to give an auth connection. So these are like technical details. But in the end, in your product, you need to have a cancel button. And if that person presses the cancel button, if a customer of yours, we need to be able to control that experience. So we need something in your product if we want to be that real-time smart cancel flow that offers the right kind of counter offers, etc., etc. Anything else we could provide, which we've tried with one customer, is to be like, let's start with an exit survey. Let's start with something that doesn't require an integration, that gives you more data around why people leave. And so we're basically sending out an exit survey after the cancellation. The problem is the value that gets is very different than the value we could provide with the integration. So the idea was like, this helps you along the way, but then the value proposition is so different. Like, it's a survey, people don't answer it, we don't save revenue, so it almost deflects from the value proposition that we're trying to do. So not really is the short answer. There's no real other way that we found.
It sounds a little bit like one of the things you need to think about is what is the sort of if we take the user, if we look at a user, and they're here today, their goal is on the other side. Often we like what we try and do is we try and get the user to sort of like directly jump, or our customer to directly reach their outcome. But what's really helpful to like a helpful thought process, right? Is if you can step them across there. So if you can break the journey up into like successes, so like they feel the progress when they get here, when they get here, when they get here. If the integration is required at each step, that obviously makes it a little bit more challenging. But it's more of a model to think through, like to break it down into like, rather than being like, okay, the thing is that you're like here is like churn. Is down, revenue is up. Like to start breaking it down a little bit when you're doing this customer experience work and understanding like what's the first step to that happening, what's the second step, what's the third step, that so they can make that jump, and maybe it's easier to make that first jump than it is to make the whole journey with you.
It's really good. This is the kind of stuff why I wanted to do this, because I think it's like, when I mentioned that some of our potential customers say like our churn is unpreventable, this is the same thing that I'm saying when I'm saying the integration is necessary. meaning that calling that bluff and being like, I'm sure it isn't. Meaning that I'm sure there's separate steps. I can tell you what comes to mind from what we've heard so far is like the real goal that you have is not just increasing net revenue retention, but for example, is to understand like what is your current churn picture look like, both quantitative and qualitatively. So for example, what we could do is we could try to help getting them a clearer picture around with the current data they already have, right? But pre us integrating. So that's something we could work on. And the things that's not something we're doing right now. What we're doing already is basically getting them to understand the value and how it would feel like to have a cancel flow that does offers based on the user's needs and preferences. Meaning that if the customer is, for example, not using this AI product du jour right now, then offering pauses in your cancellation flow can actually increase retention dramatically, because it's just very natural that you don't use an AI product all the time. And so I guess that's a value that we found, that customers that don't even use our product fully integrated yet already understand like, oh, we should be offering pauses in our product because it is inherently seasonal, or it's not a continuous usage product. And so that's something we should have in either case. So we see that as a value already, that people understand like, oh yeah, sure, that totally makes sense. And even if they would build it themselves, that is something that they get value out of immediately. So there is a chain of events where you're getting value. That is not just the full integration, and spending more time on that would definitely be would be good use of time, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think the first step is the big one, because that's the thing that's gonna you want to lower the barrier of entry to that. So it could be as simple as just connect your payment provider here. And that's the first thing. As soon as you connect your payment provider, any customer, you can trigger a reactivation email that just drops you into a custom flow.
Yeah.
and that alone would be like, just that alone be like, okay, well, just sign up, and before your free trial even ends, you can connect to your payment provider and send an email to every single customer that's lapsed, and put them into a reactivation flow. As an example, just like something, because that's going to, like, oh, okay, so that's like kind of a no-brainer. That I just have this sort of like thing that I'm not doing today, and thinking about those like moments that would just make someone like immediately be like, okay, this is helping me, because that's the hard part, right? Is like when you start to be, we know it, like if something's like, you need to sign up to this thing, and then you need to pay us, and then you need to go and get your developers to do these things, just starts adding these layers. Whereas like if progressively it's like, okay, like you've done this first step, great job, like time to value is super short, like what's the shortest path to value? Now to make the next jump, you need to go and do an integration. And it's like, okay, now I understand this. I think getting that like concrete in your customer journey, as you're expanding on this customer journey, would be very valuable.
Nice.
Like, because then that also gives you opportunities for free trials and stuff like that, because then the people can get in, have time to value, and then you can sort of start to lock them in from there. Whereas like right now, if it's like a free trial might not be super valuable, or it might be challenging because it's the time to value is, like you said, it can be long. So really focusing on like, how do I, on this journey, how can I make this sort of first confetti moment, as people like to call them, just like appear as quickly as possible, where they're like, great, you've done something, and this has had like a material impact on you, even if it's as small as like, sending an email blast to reactivate your customers.
Very good point. Love it.
Okay, we're gonna wrap. I think this is a good point for us to wrap up today. But I'll just do
ground. It's good.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do a quick recap of what we where I think there might be some focus areas for you. I think getting into this, like, I think the customer profile, nailing that down so that you are like really like tight on that when you explain the product. It's like, this product is for these people who are concerned about these things. I think that would be like a bit of a meatier way to like summarize the product. It's like, it's not just about cancellation flows. It's like, it's for product leaders who are concerned with net revenue retention. So it's like, not that it's capturing your imagination more, it's just more like, okay, it's for this person to get this outcome, and then you can go into a little bit more of the optimizing the cancellation flow, the sort of, I think some of these are less, if we were to grade these in terms of like how severe it is to like a PM, for example, like, because of this activation over retention problem that you've highlighted, these things are not they're not like severe pains or like urgent essential needs, right? Like they're sort of getting into that sort of stubbing your toe versus waking up with a toothache feeling. But for a head of product or a CPO or a CEO of a sort of seed stage company who's maybe starting to take on investment and is starting to have to create results, having like, I don't know, let's spitball, but like 25% of your revenue just like falling off because you're just like, you just let people go and they hit cancel, there's a pretty big hit. And if you can understand that and what impact it makes, I think you would have like really tighten up the value proposition. I think the second thing would be to obviously continue with your build, like this build out of the onboarding, but maybe taking some time to explore this customer experience or user experience, and this particular, the first step of that, use or buy, because I think that's a very powerful. The first strike, if you want to call it that people like when you go down to the bowling alley, how can you as quickly as possible get people to have that first strike, to feel great, to feel like everything's working good, and once you know what that is, you can start putting in supports like videos and onboardings and the sort of the lanes to keep people from getting go to balls, so you can maximize retention or activation of retention on that first step, and catapult people into being like full-fledged integrated customers.
Nice, I love it.
This was fun.
This was fun.
Helpful.
Yeah, it was helpful for me. It would be interesting to see if it's helpful for others. I realized, like, you can always, and this is like you getting a picture, you can always challenge me and like tell me to explain to you in detail what we do. Maybe that's something that I'm thinking about now. But I can just quickly recap what I got out of it.
Yeah, please.
And what I would do next. So definitely the things that you mentioned. What is the most valuable for me is that obviously all of this is floating around in our heads, right? But at actually taking the time to break this down is something that's still hard to do if you have all these biases and all these things floating around in your head. So having an external opinion and an external structure, facilitation like this is already valuable, having this as a picture. Also seeing that we're already doing a lot of things, right? And so often it feels like we're not getting anywhere, or we're not doing enough, or we should be doing this, and the other thing. And it's like, okay, we already tried a lot of things, like the things you crossed out here, the different kind of personas or people. Is actually, we already had quite a lot of hypotheses. We tried a lot of calls, and we realized like, so this is also giving me more confidence in where we stand and what we should do next. So in particular, that I accepted, so the biggest learning for me is that I accepted this gap between the first confetti moment and like the time they think about it. The way we solve this is actually to say, well, we're going to charge based on cancellations, based on revenue saved. So actually we are economically like aligned with you, so we don't have a free trial, but we can talk about pricing in another session. But the reality is you still have to get them over the line. So what else can we do to get to that first confetti moment, as you mentioned? That's definitely one thing I'm going to be super focused on as the first step, because that's the biggest, and that's the other thing I identified very clearly, is that is the biggest bottleneck right now. The biggest bottleneck is getting those people from like that have learned, that have discovered, that even have said we will buy, to actually use and integrate. And so I'll spend more time on this until we talk next, and hopefully can report back with some good results.
Yeah, it would be super cool to see that. I think in general, when you're getting into like a sort of bootstrapped product-led growth company, getting people into that thing where they're like, you can just contact them and be like, yeah, just try it out. Like, it makes it incredibly straightforward for that person versus like, well, what's the pricing and how much this costs? Well, just try it out. Like, just go try it. And it doesn't have to be a freemium product. It can be time-based. In fact, I would recommend it being time-based rather than freemium to begin with. But yeah, we'll get into pricing more later. But I would definitely say, like, just figuring out how you can have those conversations with these CEOs and heads of products and just being like, just try it out. And thinking on that would probably be like a big win for the company. Without sort of changing direction for the product overall. It's just like, what's the actual thing? And if you explore it and you realize, okay, there's absolutely no way to do this without an integration, then you need to figure out how to make that integration even easier, and how to make that process like super straightforward, so that like it's like, okay, here's the document for your developer to just like, and tell them it's a 15-minute job, like, and getting it to like super small, so like handle all the objections. But then you have like a more of a sales-led process that you have to go through, which is also challenging.
Yeah, and having clarity around that again, right? Like, I think I could show you, like, I can also show you what we have, and you can just tell me like, hey, then that looks like you're like in a sales-led thing, right? Because I think being unclear about that and saying this should be self-service, and then in the end optimizing the product around like working well with a success-led or a sales-led approach is like, if you get that wrong, that's like really sucky, right? Like like you're thinking you're building a self-service product and you aren't. And so you don't see results because you expect it to be self-service and you don't, or the other way around. So I think that would be something to be clear about as well in the coming sessions.
Cool. Well, right. Where can people find you if they want to connect? You want to learn more about Juttu?
Well, my name is in the bottom left, I think. So on LinkedIn, I'm really active and love to talk not just about cancellation flows, but all things subscription, tooling, pricing, etc. And Juttu.co is the product. So in case you want to roast us, that's your chance. You know, you've seen a lot of stuff behind the scenes here of what's not working super well yet, probably, and some things that are. So I'm glad for any feedback and so on and so forth.
Awesome. I'll make sure to include the links to those in the description below.
Nice.
Thanks a lot for taking the time. I think it was a fun session, and yeah, I'm sure we'll do one of these again in the not too distant future. Cheers, Niko.
Thanks so much, David.
Let's wrap up here. Bye-bye.